Welcome to our sixth live stream of All Things Automotive. If you're curious to learn what AWS is doing in the automotive industry, you've come to the right place.
This is a show where we dive deep in the auto tech news, look at emerging technologies, talk with our AWS customers and partners, and our own specialists on some of the most important issues in the automotive industry.
We have an exciting season with 9 shows, all themed around edge to cloud, with a focus today on software updates with our customer Sibros Technologies.
Continuously update car software at a massive scale. Love that, of course. Ready to start your engines, Dean?
Absolutely, Stefano. Let's roll. Welcome, everyone. I'm Dean Phillips, Worldwide Tech Lead for Automotive at AWS.
Hi, I'm Stefano. I'm Principal Specialist Solutions Architect, Autonomous Vehicles at AWS.
I'm based in the Motor City, Detroit, Michigan. I have automotive in my blood. I have a passion for cars and everything about them. Combine that with my love for technology, I can't think of a better industry to be in, or a better co-host to do the show with. So, take it away, Stefano.
Thanks, Dean. It's awesome to be here with you, of course. So I'm from the Italian Motor Valley, land of good food and powerful engines, but loving computers as well. Now I'm in the Silicon Valley in California to try to get the best between cars and computers. And as the perfect and most ambitious combination of the two, right now I'm very much focused on autonomous vehicle technologies.
We're excited for what we've got planned for the show. We've organized all 9 episodes around the theme of edge to cloud and back. And here's a member of our All Things Automotive team, Julia McAndrew, to tell you what's up ahead.
No journey to the cloud is truly on track unless we regularly verify the quality and security of vehicle software to ensure driver safety. So this week on episode 6, we steer our discussion to the growing importance of over-the-air updates in the automotive industry. Sibros is with us to discuss their AWS-enabled solution, designed to scale from R&D fleets of 10 vehicles to production fleets of over 10 million vehicles. They've enabled embedded in-vehicle software offerings with products like Amazon RDS, Amazon S3, AWS Machine Learning Services, Amazon CloudFront, and others. Strap in for today's special episode of All Things Automotive as we take a look at the connected vehicle ecosystem of the future. Dean and Stefano, let's hear about OTA updates with Sibros.
Well, after that, I'm ready to go on a road trip. What about you, Dean?
Absolutely. My bags are packed and ready to go. But before we bring on our guests, let's kick things off this week with a little discussion about current events in our industry. So let's get going, Stefano. What's driving in the news these days?
Yeah, we can start saying this sucker's quick, right? That's the expression that that President Biden used when testing the new Ford F-150, right? That's been the big news of the last couple of weeks. The traditional auto industry is reacting to this electric mobility, and this is surely a very important vehicle for the American industry. So, and I was impressed, Dean. Think about the thing that they presented during the presentation, right? Alexa built in, and then V2G. They say that it powers your house for 3 days in case of blackout.
Yeah.
21 charging points all around the vehicle. And they said other things that are not proper of a vehicle, like Ford Pass, 6,300 charging station across the country. So this is a parameter of selling a vehicle right now, right? So I was really, really impressed about hearing this kind of weird keywords, right, in a car presentation. What do you think?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I mean, that vehicle is going to be sweet. And I think my F-150 comes up for release next year, so maybe I'll have to get one. But anyway, so during this announcement, or recently in the last couple of weeks, Ford announced Blue Cruise will be available this fall through a power up, what they call their update capability. It'll be in the Mach-E, the F-150. And these little power ups are going to be kind of how they brand delivering new technology to the vehicle or solving warranty issues. And and when you think about it, it's not just all about the flashy new technology like Alexa, being delivered to the vehicle. It's also about saving some money. In fact,
Yeah.
Ford saved over $20 million
Wow.
solving a battery drainage issue on the new F-150, just recently. So when you consider the cost of the average dealer installed software update, maybe around the range of $400 a pop. The industry is just getting started, and that's going to be significant savings just from a warranty perspective. But in Ford's case, they expect to have around 33 million vehicles with power-up capabilities by 2028.
It's really quite impressive what you can do when you combine data with software
Yeah,
updates, right? And I think our friend Hemant will talk about that right in a few minutes. And
absolutely.
switching here on another thing, it's this it's been an important announcement in the autonomous vehicle as well, ADAS, because VW and Argo AI announced that they will begin testing level 4 autonomous EV vans this summer. By the way, this is the vehicle, very cool one, very nice
Pretty
one, the
cool
EV
looking.
bus, very cool one. And it was an interesting announcement because it's really clear that just like Argo, VW has taken the long game approach to achieving higher level of autonomous driving. And forecasting are becoming more realistic, in my opinion. So an extended period of level 3, level 4, and that we'll see private cars with eye off, but with a driver behind the wheel, and geofenced robotaxis operating limiting areas. So you see, even in composing, right, these roadmaps, instead, no, the autonomous vehicles will be there 2025. It's no more like that. They are more precise in announcement, the planning and announcing what they will do precisely. So that's nice. And they are expecting at least to have autonomous ride pooling in Hamburg by 2025. And so that's good. So, but
Yeah.
Dean, we're seeing a lot of autonomy outside cars or vans recently, aren't we?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And specifically around, from the aviation, forefront, with the uh, different Joby Aviation, Uber Air, those kind of companies. When you think about that, aerospace kind of merging into mobility, clearly kind of game changing. But yeah, we had those folks out at one of the last AWS Loft events in San Francisco before the pandemic. But it's kind of funny because a lot of times we get customer requests for meetings to engage around this technology, and they come to us and they say, well, wait a minute, we're the automotive guys, and so we have to get our
Yeah.
aviation colleagues involved. But really, around two-wheelers, motorcycles have embarked on ADAS technology. And so if you look here with the Ducati, this was the first one, but there are new models coming from them, BMW, KTM. Even talked with a startup called Damon, who is deploying ADAS technologies on motorcycles. But specifically, BMW, KTM, and Ducati are deploying Bosch's technology. And if you think about it, can you imagine how that would improve a rider's safety? I mean, the numbers will be interesting to see over time once these vehicles get on the road. But the really impressive thing here is the challenge about deploying ADAS capabilities, with a rider. You're not actually attached to the bike. There's no seatbelt kind of hooking you up to the thing. So before you can engage, say, an emergency braking function, you got to make sure that the rider is actually hanging on and has their balance distributed appropriately. So, with that displacement, lots of different sensors and technologies and checks need to be in place before you can actually engage a maneuver from that technology. So Bosch has kind of called this inertial measurement units. So some really cool, interesting technology deployed on
Yeah.
two-wheelers. I'm excited to see where it'll go.
Yeah, and of course, maybe they will integrate some augmented reality in the helmet to have the rider even more alert and prepared and stuff. It's
Sure.
such an interesting application. And by the way, I think it's there's a lot of lesson to be learned in this case, even for the 4+ wheelers, because need to remember that until LFL4, the driver must pay attention, but often is not doing that. So maybe adopting more sophisticated ways to keep the driver in the loop or to be aware, right, of the combination between driver and vehicle. That's really important. So that's really interesting case. So that's it for the news, right? And just to introduce this episode, maybe if you are a car nerd like us, probably there's a high probability you saw this video.
Yeah.
So where
Great.
we really see, a parking lot full of Teslas with lamping lights going on and off because they are updating their software, right?
Yeah, that's pretty
What do you
slick.
think about that?
Actually, yeah, I had to ask Heyman, our guest, who we'll introduce in a few minutes, what is the meaning of the flashing lights? But apparently that's when the vehicle's actually installing the update, and then the lights go off when it's completed. But pretty cool video to think, that whole parking lot being updated at the same time. But
Yeah.
as you know, Stefano, we could go on for hours talking about news in the industry, talking about cars and technology and totally geeking out like we normally do. But why don't we move on to introduce our guests? All right. Our first guest and only guest today is Heyman Sakaria. Nice to have you here, Heyman. Why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
Thank you, and nice to be here, Dean and Stefano. It's a real pleasure. So I'm Hemant. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Sibros. We're a connected vehicle company based out of Silicon Valley. My personal background, I grew up in India and I came to the US for my bachelor's and master's in computer science and electrical engineering at Carnegie Mellon University. And from there, I joined Tesla in the early days, was there for over 5 years, and now I'm here doing Sibros.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for joining us. We're really looking forward to hearing what you have to say about software updates and connected vehicle technology and how it's changing the face of automotive. So now that we've done our introductions, let's get under the hood with Sibros Technologies. So, Heyman, I've been looking forward to this episode for a while now. We started working together over a year ago, and I was really impressed with you and what you've built at Sibros. So why don't you tell us your story? How did you form the company?
Yeah, it's actually very interesting. So I have back in 2017, I had a non-Tesla vehicle, let's just say. And I ended up getting a notification in the mail that my vehicle needed a software update because there was a recall that was pending. And the recall was for a safety critical issue. And it took me over 3 months to get an appointment at the dealership to go get the car software updated. And over the course of the next year, we got 2 more such requests for the vehicle. And turns out in my family, we own 5 vehicles from this particular manufacturer that were all affected. So as a family, we took over a dozen trips to go into the dealership.
Wow.
And especially for me, having been a big part of the software update platform development at Tesla, this was a real surprise to me because we were doing this at Tesla in the early 2010, 2011 timeframe. And here we were in 2017 and 2018, and car manufacturers were still struggling with that. So mainly born out of that sort of frustration and also the fact that I knew a lot about the space, we came up with the idea of doing Sibros. And we started by just doing software updates. And we soon realized that software updates by itself would not be enough. And I think we'll touch on this a little bit later as well. But data collection is an important piece that goes into, completing the loop so that you have both data that you can use to figure out what the problem is and then do a software update to fix the problem. So think we'll talk about that a little bit later for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk about that. But let's switch from your story to making history, Hemant. I think it's we exchanged a little bit on LinkedIn just before this episode recording, right? This live show, and this topic is surely the center of gravity of all the innovations happening in the sector right now. We saw this great story by Christopher Mims over at the Wall Street Journal about the role of software and software updates in the modern vehicle, right? You are really at the center of it. So, and clearly, it's not only about OTAs and not just about cars, by the way. So, who are your customer? What do you offer?
Yeah, it's a very good point. So we offer a full end-to-end solution, which includes our back-end system, which sits on AWS, and a front-end dashboard and portal, as well as the in-vehicle software required to do software updates and data collection. So what you see here on this little demonstration here is the fact that we need to have that full 360 feedback loop between the car and the cloud. And there are two things that go to the vehicle. One is software updates, and the other is commands. And those commands could be user commands like, turn on the HVAC system or unlock the vehicle, or it could be diagnostic commands that are being sent by the engineering team at the automaker to diagnose a specific problem. And then the second part of it is collecting really high quality data from the vehicle and bringing that to the cloud. And the approach we've taken here is 100x better than whatever is out there in the industry today, barring no company. And so what we do here is we can do dynamic log configuration, which does not require a software update. So you can literally change the data that you're collecting from your fleet on a second's notice for an entire fleet of millions of vehicles deployed across the globe, and change the data that you're collecting without doing a software update, and be able to constantly refine what data you're collecting instead of just collecting data all the time. So I think as an example there, what we see with automakers today is they say, okay, we will collect this parameter once every 10 seconds. But let's say the parameter is only relevant when the vehicle is charging, and it's an electric vehicle, of course. So in that case, that parameter is not really useful when the vehicle is driving, but it's being collected, it's using cellular data, and it's using cloud data consumption as well. But if it was event-driven data, like the way we have it, then you could say only when the vehicle goes into the charging mode, I want to collect this data. And guess what? I want to collect it at a higher frequency now, because that is what is actually useful. So instead of collecting it once every 10 seconds, you collect it once every 10 milliseconds, and you have a better snapshot of data as well.
Yeah, I always like to use the concept of cranking up the server log level, when you're debugging a problem in the data center, for example. So just doing that in a vehicle, we talk about it like it's a revolutionary concept, but it's pretty basic, event driven, and, based on commands. But so OTA is obviously really important, but there's some other business aspects I touched on a little earlier, and then you kind of highlighted the problem with your own story. What is the actual current value to an OEM for a warranty related software update? And then, adding on to that, how do you actually address legacy technology in automotive versus customers who are kind of embarking on their next gen software defined architectures?
Yeah, I mean, Dean, that's the cost to the industry right now is just mind boggling. So if you look at just the numbers from 2020, there were about 30 million recalls in the US, and 50% of those recalls were for software or electronics related defects. And there were over 300 recall campaigns that were issued by automakers, and only 5 of them used software updates to fix the problem. And this does not include the vehicles that have a hardware or electronics defect that could be circumvented with software. So, it's more than just fixing a software bug. You can actually circumvent hardware issues or hardware defects as well. And
Sure.
the average, like you were saying, Dean, is between $300 to $500 per vehicle per recall. And there were 7.5 there was 15 million vehicles affected. So that's $7.5 billion in the US alone in 2020 that was spent on software recalls. So this is absolutely one of the big things that is on the minds of the automakers. And it actually affects the amount of money that they have to keep in their reserves as well. So this is a very key point that a lot of people don't know about, is that an automaker has to have reserves to account for defects and recalls. And if year on year they're showing more and more defects related to software, that reserve pool of money that cannot be invested, cannot be used for anything else, is going up. And that is affecting the automakers as well.
It's a super interesting point. If you sum them up with something we discussed in the previous episodes about, credits and funding for credits for being carbon neutral, that's a big chunk of money that automakers could spend in other ways, maybe. So that's an interesting thing. And it's even interesting to see, and we discussed a lot about that in the show, how the architectures are changing, right? It's not just software. The fact that they are not able to do that efficiently is because maybe the electronic architecture of the vehicle is too complicated, or the amount of too many components and so on. So really, really interesting. Absolutely awesome numbers. And but Hemant, how do your system work? Practically, can we do a level down in the mechanics of all these software updates? So, for example, how do you know what to send and when?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to kind of touch on that, I have this diagram which explains what's happening in our system, and this is really based on years and years of experience of having done this before, and a lot of complexity that comes with having different types of solutions. So we've come up with a solution that is highly elegant, and if we zoom into this diagram, what you'll see here is we have a concept of having a vehicle package, so that sits on the cloud, and that might have, in this small example, there are 6 software pieces for different ECUs or control units in the vehicle. And not all of those need to be sent to every vehicle. So in the case of vehicle A, it's running version 1.1, but has a different set of hardware. And so the BCM, which is the body controller, and the gateway are shown in green because they're already on the right version of software, because there was no change between version 1.1 and 1.2. But the TPMS and the battery management system app did change. So those are the only 2 pieces that are downloaded and applied to that vehicle. And once that is done, the vehicle moves as a whole to version 1.2. So in the other example with vehicle B, it has some other hardware, and the BCM and the gateway are the same, but now the TPMS changed and the infotainment unit changed. So this vehicle is maybe a higher end vehicle and has an infotainment unit, and that needs a new software version. So only those pieces are downloaded for that vehicle. And this mechanism essentially allows us to have what we call a menu and order concept. So the menu is the full package that is available on the cloud. Anything within that package is self-consistent, right? So it can be deployed to any vehicle that it applies to. But the vehicle then chooses from the menu and orders the items that are relevant for it and brings that down to the vehicle. So that's kind of how the software update flow works. And this helps reduce complexity with managing different packages for each vehicle. So you can have one universal package that can be used for an entire fleet of vehicles.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. But of course, these kind of operations need to be done in absolute safety, right? In regards with cybersecurity and how you manage all these packages. And we recently see some countries, Japan, for example, adopting the ones coming from UNECE WP29. So, for
Mhm.
example, the uniform provisions concerning the approval of vehicles with regards to cybersecurity and cybersecurity management system. And the other
Mhm.
one, really on topic, approval of vehicles with regards to software update and software updates management system. It's very good to have these norms, in my opinion, and have them written down. And
Absolutely.
I think you are compliant, right?
Yes, absolutely. And the beauty of WP29 is that it is something that is now being talked about, and it's coming up in conversations with automakers globally in Europe, in Asia, in the US. People are talking about it. Customers, essentially the automakers, are uh, trying to make sure that they're compliant with this new WP29 standard. And it's really a beautiful thing that has happened because it brings together a lot of safety elements and security elements into one uniform thing that can be applied across the globe. And that standardization really helps drive down costs from a parts and a manufacturing perspective as well, from a software perspective as well. So that whole thing, and we are compliant with it mainly because of our diligence in being safety and security first from day one. So we're Optane compliant, which is a security standard, an open source security standard, and we are certified functional safe ASIL D rated. So combining those pieces actually helps us cover a lot of the regulation already. And then we've actually published a lot of thought leadership and blog posts, along with some of the collaborators who helped develop WP29 to spread information about how it can be applied, what are the benefits of it. We have a whole blog post and series on our website that a lot of people are very excited about.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
definitely. Those blogs or that series that you guys published, David will insert that into the chat so you guys have the links to read up on it. But why don't we switch a little bit and talk a little more about the data? How is it collected? How can it be used? What about third parties? Can you go a little bit into that?
Sure. So we work with everything from two-wheelers in the Asia market to luxury vehicles in Europe, and as well as passenger vehicles and trucks in the US. And the one thing that is central to all of it is data. And every automaker wants to have ownership of that data, which we completely understand. And so the way we've architected our system is that, and our contracts as well, is that the data is all owned by the automaker, but it is managed by us because the data is coming through our platform from the vehicle to the cloud. So we manage all of that data, and we make sure that that data is safe and secure. And this data can be used by third parties to create new applications. And this is a very important thing that has not been discussed much, and I'm so excited to kind of share this, is there isn't a lot of discussion about the actual data that is being collected from the vehicle. There are a lot of systems in place on the cloud to collect to manage the data. But if I take an example of a fire truck and a good fireman, if there's no water coming out of the hose, your team is limited by what it can do, right? And so that hose, the water in that hose, is represented by the data that Sibros is able to collect from the vehicles and bring that up to the cloud. And that is what is enabling new use cases, similar to what we saw with the iPhone in 2008, where the application and that platform was developed, and then multi-billion-dollar companies were built on top of the data and that platform. Companies like Uber, Lyft, Airbnb, and we see the same thing happening now in the auto industry, especially because we're bringing this data up to the cloud.
Yeah, and that's probably the reason why Sibros goes by the tagline "enabling the connected vehicle ecosystem." Right? That sounds interesting, but very interesting. How he can translate it in practice?
Yeah, so you're exactly right. So the enabling the connected vehicle ecosystem is all about bringing that data up to the cloud and exposing it through standard interfaces for everyone to consume. And we have access to that data in an anonymized manner, but working with the automakers, we're able to get their permission and the end user's consent to use the data for providing new applications and services to the end consumer. And again, at the end of it, the end consumer still has all of the power to choose whether they want to share that data or not, and what services that they want to enable based on that. So progressive insurance mechanisms using data from the vehicle could be something that is very exciting and can be developed. Today, the state of the art is using mobile phones in the vehicle when you're driving, and that's not very accurate as compared to the real data coming from the vehicle.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much to talk about, and there's so much we've covered so far in the show. But at this point, it's time to roll up our sleeves and get into the shop, dive into the nuts and bolts of the topic. So, Stefano, why don't you pop the hood and get us started?
Hey, Matt, I'm pretty sure you're going to show us very cool stuff today. So let's get started. So, what's the best place to get started with an architecture?
Yep. Yeah. So we'll quickly cover an architecture and go right into a demo, because I think that's the part that will really get everyone excited. But as far as our architecture is concerned, we have two slides. So this first slide here is showing the firmware pieces. And I know there's a lot going on here, so let me kind of quickly break it down. So you see the Deep Updater module on the left, and then Deep Logger on the right. The Deep Updater itself has two modules, a package manager and an update manager, that sit on the telematics unit and the gateway of the vehicle, or any combination of that. So we can support over 30 architectures today already. So it's very flexible. The Deep Logger, again, can sit on the telematics or the gateway unit. And from here, once all of this firmware is in place on existing hardware that the automaker has, we can move to the next step. So the next step above this is the cloud piece. And if we go to the next slide, we'll see how the firmware piece connects to the cloud. So the yellow portion on the bottom is the same as what we just showed before. And in blue, you have all the pieces that are managing software updates and data collection on the cloud. And we're leveraging a lot of Amazon's, AWS's core functionality to achieve some of this these features. We're using S3 and CloudFront for distribution of packages. We're using the AWS IoT core. We're using the timescale databases and Amazon Kinesis to kind of really bring all of this together and be able to manage fleet-wide software update deployments, as well as collect data from an entire fleet. And that data could be in the order of petabytes per day. So it's a very large scale of data that we're able to collect thanks to our collaboration with Amazon.
There's so much in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much in that solution and in the architecture, but how much of it can you kind of show us in a demo today?
Yeah, I mean, I can show two different things actually. So if we want to run through two quick demos, we can start with the software update solution. So okay, so here you see our main dashboard. You can see different metrics about the vehicles and the fleet, as well as how much data is being uploaded or downloaded. You can dive into the actual deployments and see what the success rate is, how much time each deployment is taking, and any other metrics. And you can do this based on any vehicle group. So of course, this is all simulated data that we're showing here, but you could slice and dice the data in any way you want. And yeah, of course, just showing how we can do different time windows. So here you can see a list of all our vehicles. You can search and filter by any vehicles. We can go ahead and create a vehicle group. We'll call it the AWS demo group. And we can choose from many attributes. Here we have 6 attributes that we're showing for an example, but this could be a list of maybe over 50 or 100 different static attributes that we get from the automaker. So in this case, let's use the Sibros Thunderbolt vehicles. That's a group of 10 vehicles. We've created this group. Now let's go over to packages, and we'll see how you can see what software version is running on the various packages, versions of the package. Next, we'll go to rollouts, which is where you can issue a new rollout. So we'll create a new demo rollout for AWS and show you all the features there. So we choose the group that we just selected, created of 10 vehicles, and we can choose different strategies for doing software updates. So you can see if you're doing a staged update, you can do 10% of vehicles and then 40 and then 50%. And you can choose to pause between the stages, or you can do a rolling window where all the vehicles are updated. Yep, so basically select Wi-Fi and the approvers that you want for the rollout. We'll go ahead and approve the rollout. And now you'll see a pie chart with progress of the vehicles as they're being updated live. And this is coming from the vehicles. If we go to a specific vehicle, we can actually see all the updates that are happening. And you can see multiple updates happening in parallel on these 2 ECUs that are marked in blue. We can dive into each of the ECUs and we can see full detailed logs of the update that is happening. In this particular case, we have ECUs which have multiple blocks. They have application block and a calibration block. And this kind of just runs through the whole process of doing a software update. If we go back to the other screen, we'll see now the updates are on the way to being completed. And that kind of wraps up sort of a quick demo on software updates from our portal.
Yeah, that is super cool. So comprehensive and really demonstrates the sophistication of your solution, and just picking every little detail about the rollout. So that's fantastic. So in order to actually do one of these updates, you need to collect some data, and there's an enormous amount of capability you have around that. So why don't you talk to us and share another demo if you can around that as well.
So this is our dashboard view, Dean and Stefano. You can see for each vehicle, all of the data and the deployments and software updates that might have happened. So it's one central view for every single vehicle. And you can select different types of dashboards that you want to view and any parameters from the vehicle. So in this example, we have a BMS system, and we can zoom in on a section of the graph, and you can actually dive a lot deeper into the data from that particular time window. And you'll see all the other graphs also adjust to that same time window. And this is nice because then you can really correlate the data across different parameters from the vehicle. You can also resize the windows, move them around. It's a very highly configurable dashboard that our customers can create. You can add new widgets. We're constantly adding new types. There's graphs and scatter plots, text widgets and progress bars. But for the sake of time, we won't go into that too much right now. And we'll cover this example. So just have a quick look at this page here, and we'll go into what this means on the config. So the config is really our special sauce, right? This is where we can dynamically configure what messages need to be logged based on certain conditions. So here you see that we're logging when the vehicle speed is greater than 10, we're logging the IMU acceleration and gyro position. And we can add more signals. So for example, we can add the charging status. and if the vehicle is not charging, then collect this data. So now this is what is configured. Now, if we go back to our other dashboard, you'll see that there's a block of time where that data is not being collected. And that's because the vehicle speed is actually less than 10 miles an hour at that time. So if you look at the vehicle speed in orange and you compare that with the vehicle pitch, you can see that the data stopped getting collected during that time window. And this is really powerful if you can do this on the fly with not just one vehicle, but a fleet of vehicles. So you can collect really high quality data when you want it, instead of collecting it all the time. So that kind of wraps up the second piece of our demo.
That's really interesting. And if I may, Hemant, it's really awesome to see the user interface, how you really made it easy for the users of the system to interact with this very, very complicated architecture, all these different architecture on the field and so on. And again, it's not just collecting data, having all the pipes and everything, but even presenting the information in an easy way. I loved it, really. It's really interesting how you compose the interface. Probably it's some kind of reactive Vue.js. Even the framework that you used is very powerful. So very nice.
No, thank you. It's built and powered using a lot of open source tools as well. And so we have the open source community to thank for that. And no, you're absolutely right. I think having a simple view and a clear, elegant design really helps focus in on the things that actually matter.
Yeah, it's definitely an amazing solution and quite comprehensive. Really impressed with it. So hopefully we've been able to demystify, the OTA capabilities and solutions, with technologies like what Sibros provides. So that said, thank you so much, Hemant, for joining us. I really can't wait to see how the market kind of gobbles up your solution and how our partnership evolves over time.
Absolutely. Really looking forward to it, and very excited to be here. And thank you for having me on the show.
Wonderful. And let's make history.
Yeah, thank you. And let's do it.
A very Amazonian statement. Take care, Hemant. Thanks so much for joining us. So now's the time in our show where we talk about upcoming events in the industry that you might enjoy. Hey, Stefano, what's up around the corner?
Yeah, this is the segment where Dean and I share what we think are really interesting events and resources. And we're heading into a season of great ways to learn more about innovations in the automotive space. And talking about events, what do we have in the next weeks, Dean?
Well, there's a cool webinar coming up on June 9th from the Center for Automotive Research featuring our very own Brian Bresveden. He's a worldwide autonomous vehicle specialist, along with partners from D-Space, Optimus Ride, and CAR's president and CEO, Carla Bello.
Yeah, super interesting topic, of course. And on same day, June 9th, always great TechCrunch sessions on mobility. It's TechCrunch annual conference on mobility tech with a focus on automated driving. And especially this year on self-driving deliveries, annotation labeling and artificial intelligence, and the role of venture capital to make all of this really scale. And again, this is an important topic too. Then, Dean, I think we have a couple of cool new AWS artifacts, blog posts, and stories, right?
Yeah, we just published a new case study from 5 AI on our website, thanks to James Barr and Julia from our team working with them. They have a really cool story to tell about their how they use AWS for testing their automated driving systems. So please check that out too. That'll be in the chat, I think, a link for you to follow.
Wonderful. And we have as well this new Rivian case study. Rivian executes vision of agile engineering on AWS with Madhavi Izanaka, the Rivian CIO. And this is absolutely important. Achieving agility, achieving speed. We discussed about that many times, and it was quite interesting to read in this case study that they improved by 66%, right, in terms of speed and how they do things, efficiency, using the right instance and everything we can do on AWS cloud. So really, really interesting read.
Yep. And again, we'll be talking in July at the Italian Motor Valley Fest. So looking forward to that too.
That would be really awesome.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's a deal. Let's meet in Italy if we can. But we'll see how it goes. Time to wrap up our episode. But hopefully you've enjoyed the show today, and that David Hale, our chat moderator, was able to address your questions in the chat and provide you with some valuable resources.
But if you're catching this on demand, just send along comments or questions to media series live streams at amazon.com or use the hashtag allthingsautomotive.
And the show doesn't end here. In 2 weeks, we'll be back with Upstream, a really cool startup to talk about cybersecurity in connected mobility space.
And we saw how much that's important for the sector right now, even with all these regulations coming up. So I'm really looking forward to see it, right?
Yeah. Yep. So cool. It's going to be a great show. So that about wraps it up for our 6th episode of All Things Automotive. We hope to see you back next time. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much for joining us, and see you next time on All Things Automotive.